They never imagined that the day they threw their father's things out would be the same day they discovered how deeply they'd misjudged him. The anger felt righteous as they worked, loud and hot. It drowned out the quiet truth that had been trying to reach them for years. On a gray Thursday in Dayton, Ohio, the Harper house looked like a storm had gone through it. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, drawers hung open, and framed photos lay face down on the living room floor. Outside, the autumn wind pushed dead leaves along the sidewalk like small, tired secrets. Inside, 74-year-old Thomas Harper stood near the bottom of the stairs, one hand resting on the chipped wooden banister he had sanded himself years ago. His shoulders, once broad from decades at the GM plant, now folded inward as if he were trying to take up less space in his own home. He watched his children move through the rooms like strangers sent by some agency he hadn't agreed to call. His oldest daughter, Megan, moved like a whirlwind through the living room, her ponytail swaying as she grabbed a stack of books from the shelf. 38, marketing manager, always in control. That was the role she knew how to play. She dropped the books into a cardboard box labeled Donate in thick black marker and said, "If you're moving in with Ethan, we have to clear this place out. It's not safe for you to live here alone anymore." On the other side of the room, her younger brother Ethan emptied a small cabinet where Thomas kept old receipts, birthday cards, and random screws, just in case. 34, software engineer, new father, the son who fixed things with spreadsheets and plans. He opened a faded cigar box, saw loose change and a broken watch, and tossed the whole thing into a black trash bag with a sigh. "This is all junk, Dad," Ethan said. "You keep every piece of paper you ever touched. No one needs this many memories." By the front door, a plastic bin overflowed with framed photos, snow globes, and little wooden cars Thomas had carved when the kids were young. A photo of their late mother, Linda, peeked out from beneath tangled Christmas lights, the glass cracked across her smiling face. Thomas nodded toward it and whispered, "Be careful with that." Megan barely glanced up as she answered, "We can't keep everything just because it has a memory attached to it. We're doing this for your own good. If your chest tightens just imagining this scene, ask yourself honestly, if you were one of these children, would you see love here? Or control dressed up as responsibility? Deep down, who would you be standing next to in this living room?" In the kitchen, cabinet doors opened and closed in quick succession, while Jenna, Ethan's wife, sorted through dishes and mugs, deciding what counted as practical. The smell of coffee floated in from the counter, mixing with lemon cleaner, and the stale air of a house that had held too many unspoken arguments. From the hallway, Megan's voice carried through as she called, "You still haven't packed your clothes, Dad. We have to be out of here by Saturday. You promised you wouldn't fight us on this." "I'm not fighting," Thomas said quietly from the living room. "I'm just watching." Oddly, Ethan came back in with another box, this one filled with old vinyl records, their sleeves worn at the edges from 1,000 plays. "Do you even listen to these anymore?" he asked. "You don't even have a working record player. We can sell them online and get you some cash." "Your mother and I used to dance to those records," Thomas replied, eyes on the box instead of his son. "Friday nights, after you two went to bed." From the hallway, Megan huffed and said, "We're not saying your memories don't matter, Dad. We're saying your safety matters more. You almost fell down the stairs last week. What if next time you're alone? Have you ever watched someone wrap their fear in good intentions and call it love? If this moment hits you, tell me. Whose side would you be on right now?" Thomas tried to focus on his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the nurse had shown him. The doctor had told him to avoid emotional strain, as if that were something you could schedule like a dentist appointment. He shuffled toward the faded blue armchair in the corner and sat, feeling the familiar groan of the springs beneath him as the house around him was taken apart piece by piece. Jenna appeared in the doorway, carrying a stack of mismatched mugs. "Hey, Thomas," she said gently. She always called him Thomas. Never Dad. Never Mr. Harper. "We're setting aside a few of your favorites for Ethan's place. The rest we'll donate. Is that okay with you?" He forced a small smile and answered, "Whatever you all think is best. Seems like you've already decided." She hesitated, then turned back towards the kitchen, the clink of ceramic following her like a trail. Outside, a pickup truck pulled into the driveway, engine rumbling. Megan glanced through the window and said, "The junk removal guys are here. Perfect. Let's start loading the big stuff we're not keeping. Old recliners, broken lamps, that coffee table you've had since the '80s. She stopped when she saw her father's face, the way his jaw tightened even as his shoulders sagged. "Dad," she added more softly, "I know this is hard, but you said yourself you can't keep up with the house. This is what families are supposed to do." "I said I was tired," Thomas replied. "I didn't say I wanted my life piled onto a truck." Ethan stepped in quickly, his tone brisk as if efficiency could protect him from guilt. "It's not your life," he said. "It's stuff. You'll have new things at our place. A safer bed, grab bars, the works. This is how it goes. Parents get old, kids step in. That's what responsible people do." The word responsible lodged in Thomas's chest like a stone, heavier than any box in the room. The junk removal workers came up the front steps, boots thudding on the wood. One of them, a man in a Reds cap, nodded at Thomas and said, "Afternoon, sir. We'll just take whatever they point out. All right?" Thomas nodded automatically, his gaze drifting past the man's shoulder toward the corner of the living room where a small wooden chest sat half hidden behind the armchair. It was scratched and plain, easy to overlook, yet suddenly it was the only thing in the room he could really see. Inside that chest lay the one part of his life he had never planned to share with anyone. Not Megan, not Ethan, not even Linda while she was alive. It was the only thing he hadn't been able to throw away, no matter how many times he told himself he should. Sometimes late at night he would sit in that same armchair and stare at it, arguing silently with himself about whether to finally open it again or carry it out to the trash. Ethan's gaze swept the room, taking in the furniture, the boxes, the piles destined for the truck. His eyes followed the line of his father's worried glance and landed on the wooden chest. Curiosity sharpened his expression. He took a few steps toward it, his hand already reaching out. "What's in here, Dad?" he asked, fingers closing around the small metal handle. Thomas's hand shot out, fingers trembling as they hovered in the air. "Leave that," he said, his voice sharper than it had been all day. The workers, Megan and Ethan, all looked at him in surprise, as if he'd suddenly shouted in a quiet church. The room, already tense, seemed to tighten around them, the air heavier, the light from the window suddenly too bright to feel comforting. Ethan let out a short, tight laugh, a sound with no real humor in it. "If it's more junk, it's going on the truck like everything else," he said. "No more secrets that keep everyone guessing, Dad. Not this time." Megan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them both with a mix of impatience and unease, as if she sensed something passing between them that she didn't quite understand. Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again, his throat too tight to force words through. His heart thudded against his ribs, every beat echoing with all the things he had never told his children. He could have begged. He could have warned them. He could have said, "If you open that, nothing will ever be the same between us again." Instead, he stayed silent, frozen in the chair as Ethan tightened his grip on the handle. Ethan glanced at his sister, then back at his father, misreading the fear in Thomas's eyes as stubbornness. "You can't keep controlling everything," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His knuckles whitened as he pulled upward. The lid creaked, wood scraping softly against wood, the sound far too small for what it was about to unleash. He lifted the lid of the chest, completely unaware that what waited inside would turn everything they believed about their father upside down. The moment Ethan lifted the lid, a faint scent rose from the wooden chest, old paper, cedar, and thyme. But before either child could see what lay inside, Thomas's mind slipped backward, pulled into memories he had spent half his life trying not to revisit. The room around him blurred as the past came into focus, sharp and unforgiving, like headlights cutting through fog. He was back in 1987, standing in the same living room, but everything was brighter, newer, filled with the soft hum of a life still unfolding. Linda stood near the window, smoothing her dress as she prepared for a parent-teacher conference. The kids, barely out of elementary school, argued over a toy truck. Thomas had stood in that spot and felt the warm, steady beat of family life, a rhythm he'd spent years trying to keep alive even when the world around him shifted. Linda had always been the heart of their home, a woman with gentle hands and fierce determination. She taught the children to speak kindly and dream loudly. Thomas had admired her for that, maybe even envied her. He remembered one night when she looked at him across the kitchen table and said, "Tom, one day these kids will need more than stability. They'll need truth." He had nodded, but inside he'd wondered which truths she meant. He still wondered. As the memory rolled forward, he saw the night their world cracked open, the night Linda collapsed by the garden shed while Thomas was inside searching for a wrench. The paramedics had moved quickly, but not quickly enough. Megan and Ethan had stood behind him on the lawn, their small hands clutching each other as blue and red lights flickered against their faces. He had told them she was gone. He could still hear the sound Megan made, a small broken gasp. After the funeral, people brought casseroles, prayers, and words that didn't help. "You're strong, Tom," they said. "You'll get through this." But strength felt like a coat too heavy to wear every day. He returned to work, made lunches, folded laundry, and kept the kids moving forward. Yet despite every effort, something began slipping between him and his children, something he never learned how to reach again. Years later, when the kids were in high school, Thomas found a cardboard box in the attic filled with Linda's journals, letters, and small notes written on grocery receipts. Hidden beneath them was an envelope with his name in her handwriting. He had sat on the floor, dust settling in the sunlight, and read her words slowly. She wrote about fear, about things she had never told the children, things she hoped he would one day explain when they were ready. But he never did. He convinced himself the timing was never right. Grief made him quieter. The kids mistook his silence for emotional distance. He mistook their independence for healing. None of them were completely right. None of them were completely wrong. If you've ever lost someone who held your family together, tell me. Did the silence after their absence ever feel louder than their voice? As the years went on, Thomas kept one ritual sacred. Every Christmas Eve, after the kids went to bed, he opened the wooden chest, the chest Linda's father had built for her when she graduated high school. He placed the journals inside, the letters, and a few other items tied to the truth she hoped he'd share someday. He promised himself, when they were older, when their lives were steadier, when they needed it most, he would tell them. But later kept becoming next year, then when they're ready, then when I'm stronger. The distance between them widened. Megan grew into a woman who believed control meant safety. Ethan became a man who solved problems with logic and avoided anything that smelled like emotional chaos. Thomas watched them build their lives and whispered to Linda's memory, "I hope I'm doing this right." He rarely believed he was. Then came the fall. One misstep on the stairs that sent him sliding down half a flight before he caught himself. No broken bones, but bruised ribs and shaken pride. When the kids rushed over the next morning and saw him favoring his side, their worry turned to frustration. That's when they insisted he move in with Ethan. That's when the clean-out began. And that's when Thomas realized he had waited too long to tell them the truth Linda had left behind. Back in the present, Ethan's hand hovered over the inside of the chest, his brow furrowing as he peered inside. He could see envelopes, faded notebooks, and a stack of small objects wrapped carefully in cloth. Megan stepped closer, drawn by a curiosity she didn't want to admit. "Dad, what is all this?" she asked, her voice quieter now, not impatient, uncertain. Thomas felt a tremor run through him, part fear, part relief, part of pain he had carried for nearly 30 years. "It's not junk," he said, barely above a whisper. "It's your mother's. And mine." Ethan paused, his hand still inside the chest. "Mom's?" he repeated, thrown off balance. He looked up at his father, confusion flickering with something softer. "Why would you hide her things?" The question hit Thomas like a blow he'd earned long ago. He opened his mouth, words gathering like a slow tide. He wanted to explain the grief, the guilt, the promises he had broken to himself. He wanted to tell them everything. But the air shifted. Someone else had stepped into the living room. Jenna appeared in the doorway, holding a thin envelope she had found in the hallway closet. "This was tucked behind some old coats," she said. "It has your name on it, Ethan." She held it out toward him, unaware that the envelope matched the handwriting on the letters inside the chest. Ethan stared at the envelope, then at his father, because he recognized the handwriting instantly. His mother's handwriting, a letter addressed to him that he had never seen, and before anyone could speak, before Thomas could stop him, Ethan tore the envelope open. But the first line inside didn't just confuse him. It shook him so deeply he forgot how to breathe. Ethan froze as his eyes traced the first sentence of the letter. His mother's handwriting, gentle, looping, unmistakable, seemed almost unreal after so many years. The room faded around him, the boxes, the junk removal workers, even his father. All he could hear was the soft rustle of the paper in his trembling hands. Megan leaned closer, confusion deepening as she watched her brother's expression shift from surprise to something raw and unfamiliar. "Ethan, what does it say?" she asked, her voice unsteady. He didn't answer. His lips parted but no words came out. His mind was racing too fast to form any sound. Thomas sat rigid in his chair, his stomach twisting as if someone had turned his insides into knots. He knew that letter. He had read its companion years ago. He knew the truth inside it was heavy, too heavy for a child, too heavy for a teenager, and apparently still too heavy for a grown man with a wife and daughter of his own. He whispered, "Please, read it carefully." Ethan swallowed hard and forced himself to continue. The letter began tenderly, as if Linda had written it on a normal Tuesday afternoon, not in the final months of her life. She wrote about how proud she was of him, how she saw in him the quiet strength that reminded her of her own father. Then the tone shifted. She wrote about the arguments she and Thomas had hidden from the children, arguments that weren't about money, or chores, or typical marriage battles, arguments about a truth she wasn't brave enough to reveal to them herself. "What truth?" Ethan murmured, barely aware he had spoken aloud. Megan stepped closer, her breath catching. The room had gone still, the workers pausing discreetly as tension filled every corner of the house. Even Jenna hovered in the doorway, unsure if she should stay or leave. The letter continued, revealing a moment years before Linda's death. One night in the hospital when doctors ran tests she had begged Thomas not to tell the kids about. Tests that revealed something unexpected, something she struggled to understand. She wrote that she needed time to process it, to prepare for what it meant for the family. "I didn't want you children to think differently of me," the letter read, "and I didn't want your father to carry this burden alone." Megan frowned. "What burden?" she whispered. She looked at her father, who kept his gaze fixed on the floor. Her voice sharpened. "Dad, what is she talking about?" Thomas's throat tightened. Every instinct told him to protect them, the same instinct that had made him hide the truth all these years. But he could feel the weight pressing down on him now, the weight of silence, of secrets kept long past their usefulness. Ethan's eyes scanned the next paragraph, and his whole body stiffened. Linda wrote about guilt, deep guilt, for a mistake she had made before Megan was born. A mistake Thomas forgave her for, but one she could never forgive herself. "I need you to know something someday," the letter read. "Something that will help you understand your father's heart. He has carried a truth for me that wasn't his to carry." Ethan's hands shook. He lowered the letter slowly, his face pale. "Mom, regrets?" he whispered. "A mistake? What mistake?" He looked at his father with eyes flashing between fear, confusion, and accusation. Thomas met his gaze only briefly before looking away again. Megan moved toward Ethan, but he stepped back, clutching the letter to his chest. "Why would she say you carried something for her?" he asked, his voice cracking in a way Megan hadn't heard since they were kids. "Why would she say we needed to understand your heart?" Thomas inhaled sharply, his ribs aching with the effort. "Because she was trying to protect you," he said softly. "Both of you." His voice sounded fragile, like it might crumble under its own weight. "We thought the truth would hurt you more than the silence would." Megan's eyes filled with frustration. You don't get to decide what hurts us, she snapped. You don't get to rewrite our lives just because you think you know best. Then, softer, almost broken, we lost her too, Dad. Didn't you trust us to handle the truth? If you've ever held on to a secret thinking it would spare someone pain, only to realize it created more distance instead, share your truth. Have you ever seen someone hide their pain to protect you? Thomas rubbed trembling hands together. It wasn't about trust, he said. It was about timing. It was about waiting until you were strong enough to understand the whole story. Anger tightened Ethan's jaw. We're adults now. We can handle it, whatever it is. He held the letter toward his father. What did she mean, Dad? What mistake? What truth? Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the house breathing around him, as if even the walls were waiting. Then he opened his eyes and looked at his children, not as the adults they had become, but as the children he had once tucked into bed, the ones who had trusted him with their entire world. Your mother wasn't perfect, he began slowly, but she loved you more than you could ever understand. The room pulsed with silence. One of the workers shifted his weight, uncomfortable with being close to such private grief, but unable to step away. Megan's nails dug into her arms as she waited. Ethan's breath came short and uneven. Jenna pressed a hand to her mouth. She made a choice once, Thomas continued, a choice that affected all of us, a choice she never wanted either of you to carry on your shoulders. His voice trembled. She asked me to protect you from the truth until the right moment came. And what moment is that? Ethan demanded. Now? Is this the right moment? During a move you didn't want, while we're throwing away your things. Thomas exhaled shakily. Maybe the right moment never comes, he whispered. Maybe life just pushes it into the open. Megan took a step forward, her voice trembling. Dad, tell us, what did she do? Thomas opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Ethan looked back into the chest, desperate now, as if the answers might be hiding somewhere inside. His hand brushed against a small velvet pouch tucked beneath the journals. He pulled it out, the pouch light as air. Something inside it shifted with a soft click. What is this? Ethan asked. Thomas's eyes widened in panic. Ethan, don't! But Ethan had already loosened the drawstring. He reached inside and closed his fingers around something cold and metallic. He pulled it out slowly, a small silver charm, shaped like a tear, engraved with two initials that didn't match anyone in their family. The charm slipped from Ethan's fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. What does that mean? Megan whispered, her voice barely audible. Thomas's face crumpled. He bowed his head, pressing a shaking hand to his forehead as if trying to hold himself together. The words he had feared for decades were finally breaking free, surging toward the surface. But before he could gather the strength to speak, the front door swung open. A woman stepped inside, someone none of them had seen in years, someone whose presence here made Thomas's heart stop cold. And she said the one sentence that shattered everything they thought they knew. Thomas. They deserved to know the truth now. All of it. The woman standing in the doorway looked as if she had stepped out of another lifetime, one Thomas had prayed would never collide with the present. Her hair, once a deep auburn, had softened into warm chestnut waves. Her eyes shimmered with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. She held herself with the quiet strength of someone who had rehearsed this moment for years, but still feared speaking the first word. Megan blinked rapidly, trying to place the familiar face. Ethan stared as though the world had tilted beneath him. Jenna stepped aside, clutching the doorframe as if she needed something solid to hold on to. Even the junk removal workers hesitated, eyes darting between the family and the stranger who had just detonated a silent bomb. Thomas felt his heart slam against his ribs. "Laura," he whispered, his voice breaking on the name he had avoided for 3 decades. His hands trembled so violently he had to grip the armrests of his chair. Why are you here?" His tone held no anger, only fear. Fear of the truth he had buried finally clawing its way into daylight. Megan gasped softly. "Laura." Her eyes widened as the memory finally clicked, the woman who appeared briefly in photos from their early childhood. always standing a bit too far in the background. The woman Linda had once called her oldest friend. Mom's friend, Laura? But Ethan saw something else. Something deeper. Something sharper. The way Laura looked at his father, not as an old family friend, but as someone who carried a secret with him. A shared one. Ethan's pulse quickened. "What truth?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "What truth do we deserve to know?" Laura stepped fully inside, her gaze sweeping over the scattered boxes and broken memories. She winced when she saw the cracked picture frame of Linda on the floor. Gently, she bent down and picked it up. For a moment, she held it against her chest, eyes shimmering. "Linda trusted me," she said quietly. "She trusted me with things she never told anyone else. And she asked me if something ever happened to her, to make sure the truth didn't die with her." Thomas shook his head. "Not like this. They're not ready." Laura's voice softened. "Tom, they're not children anymore, and the pain of not knowing has already shaped them more than the truth ever could." Megan felt her throat tighten. "What truth?" she whispered again. "Please, someone tell us." Thomas's eyes locked onto the silver charm still lying on the floor, the tear-shaped pendant. The initials, a piece of a past that refused to stay buried. "It's mine," he murmured. "It belonged to someone I shouldn't have cared for, someone I tried to forget." Ethan stiffened. "You cheated on Mom?" The accusation hit the air like a slab of ice. Thomas flinched. "No," he said quickly. "I never betrayed your mother. Not once." Laura stepped closer. "He's telling the truth. Nothing happened between us after he married Linda." Jenna exhaled shakily, torn between relief and confusion. Megan ran a hand through her hair, mind spinning. "Then what is going on? Whose initials are those? Why would Mom write letters about guilt and mistakes? What choice did she make?" Thomas looked at Laura helplessly. Laura looked at Thomas sadly. And then Laura turned to Megan and Ethan, her expression soft but unwavering. "Your mother wasn't sure who your biological father was." The room went silent, the kind of silence that roars, the kind that sucks the air out of your lungs. Megan's legs weakened, and she grabbed the back of the sofa to steady herself. Ethan felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears, each pulse like a violent drum. "That's not possible," Ethan whispered. "Mom adored Dad. They were perfect." "No family is perfect," Laura said gently. "Linda made a mistake before she married Tom, a mistake she regretted for the rest of her life. She wasn't sure if that mistake had consequences, and she didn't want her children growing up thinking they were unwanted or born from confusion." Thomas pressed his palms together tightly, like a prayer he had never learned to say out loud. "When you were little," he said, voice breaking, "your mother told me she wasn't certain about paternity. She begged me to raise you both as mine. She said she knew she loved me, that she wanted our family, and she would never make another choice that could hurt us again." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "So, Dad, you didn't know if you were—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Thomas nodded slowly. "For years, I didn't. But I loved you both from the moment you were placed in my arms. Nothing could have changed that." He swallowed hard. "Nothing." Ethan's hands tightened into fists, the letter trembling between his fingers. "Mom wrote that you carried something for her. The paternity question. That's what she meant?" Laura nodded. "Yes, she told me everything." "So?" Megan stared at the floor, her voice thin and cracking. "All these years, and you never told us?" Thomas's eyes brimmed. "I didn't want you to feel like you didn't belong. I didn't want you to think your mother doubted you. I didn't want her mistake to become your burden. If you were in their place right now, discovering that love raised you even when biology was uncertain, tell me honestly, who would you trust in this moment? The parent who kept the secret, or the parent who made the mistake?" Ethan shook his head, chest heaving. "So, which one of us—" Laura hesitated. "We don't know. Linda never found out. She was too afraid of the answer, and by the time she considered it, it was too late." Megan closed her eyes as tears streamed down her face. "So either one of us could be—" Thomas whispered the ending for her. "Could be someone else's child, The revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. Ethan looked at Laura sharply, his voice trembling with a question he didn't want to ask, but couldn't stop. Who was the man? Laura exchanged a long, heavy look with Thomas. Neither of them spoke, and then Laura finally whispered the name, one Megan and Ethan never expected to hear. It was Robert Quinn, a name that didn't just shock them, it terrified them. The name Robert Quinn struck the room like a lightning bolt, not because he was a stranger, but because he absolutely wasn't. Ethan staggered back, nearly hitting the coffee table. Megan's hand flew to her mouth. Even Jenna's breath caught as recognition rippled across her face. Robert Quinn wasn't just a man from their past. He was the man from town you never wanted to meet in a dark alley. A man with a reputation that followed him like a shadow. A man rumored to have broken more laws, and more hearts, than anyone could count. He was trouble, Megan whispered, her voice trembling. Mom? Mom knew him? Laura nodded slowly. Before she met Tom. It was brief, a mistake she regretted instantly. But she didn't know she was pregnant yet, and by the time she realized it, she was already with Tom, already building the life she truly wanted. Thomas closed his eyes. He remembered the night Linda told him. He remembered the fear in her voice, the way she held his hand like it was the only thing keeping her alive. He had forgiven her instantly, but he had never forgotten the weight of that confession. Ethan felt as though the ground beneath him was shifting. So you're saying that one of us could be his? The very idea made his stomach twist. Robert Quinn had been arrested twice while they were in middle school, once for assault, once for possession. He'd left town years ago, wrapped in scandal and bitterness. Megan's breathing grew rapid. Mom kept that from us. Dad kept it from us? She looked at Thomas, betrayal clouding her features. You let us grow up not knowing who we really were? Thomas's eyes were red now, the moisture gathering but refusing to fall. No, he whispered. I let you grow up knowing who you were to me. And that was enough. Megan shook her head fiercely. It wasn't your decision to make. We had a right to know. All these years we've lived with questions about ourselves, why we are the way we are, why we didn't fully understand you sometimes, why you felt distant, and this whole time, you kept the biggest truth of our lives hidden. Ethan's voice broke. Did you ever find out who he fathered? Thomas looked away. We agreed not to test. We agreed love was enough. We agreed the past would stay in the past. My, if you've ever uncovered a truth that rewrote part of your identity, even just a piece, tell me, what's the hardest truth you've ever had to face about where you come from? For a moment, no one spoke. Not even Laura. The air thickened around them. The truth wasn't just painful. It was destabilizing. It was a truth with sharp edges, capable of cutting every bond in the room. Jenna finally broke the silence. Okay, she said softly, trying to breathe calm into the moment. Let's slow down. This doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change who raised you. Tom is still… No, Megan snapped. Everything changes. Everything. My entire life. My identity. My trust. Every memory. I don't even know what's real anymore. She sank down onto the sofa, hands trembling. What if I'm not even his daughter? Thomas felt that sentence like a knife to the chest. You are my daughter, he said, voice cracking. No matter what blood says, no matter what tests say. I raised you. I held you. I loved you. That's what matters. Ethan's jaw tightened. And what about him? He asked sharply. What about Robert Quinn? Does he even know? Did Mom tell him? Did you tell him? Thomas's silence was the answer. Laura stepped forward. Linda didn't want him involved. Ever. She cut ties the second she realized she was pregnant. She told him nothing. She wanted a peaceful life, away from the chaos he brought. Ethan's hand shook as he ran them through his hair. So, he might not even know one of us exists? No, Laura said quietly. He knows. Megan's eyes shot up. How? How could he know? Laura hesitated. Too long. Thomas's head jerked up, his face tightening. Laura, you didn't. Laura swallowed. I had to, Tom. Years ago, before you and the kids moved away. He confronted me. He told me he suspected. He'd done the math. He asked if Linda had ever confided in me. Thomas stood abruptly, shock flooding his expression. You told him? I didn't confirm anything, Laura insisted, tears filling her eyes. But I also didn't lie, and he took that as a yes. Ethan's heart dropped. Megan's mouth fell open. Jenna pressed a hand to her stomach. Even the workers looked frozen. He found me again last year, Laura continued, her voice trembling. He said he wanted to know which child was his. He said he deserved to know. Thomas's voice was low, shaking with anger he hadn't felt in decades. What did you tell him? Nothing, she whispered. But he wasn't satisfied. He started asking questions. Around town, digging, looking at photos. Megan shivered. Why would he care after all these years? Laura's expression darkened. Because Robert Quinn doesn't let go. Not of people, not of mistakes, not of debts. Ethan exhaled, a cold realization washing over him. So he's still looking for us? Laura nodded. And he's coming here, she whispered. Everyone stared at her. How do you know? Thomas asked, dread curling through him. Laura took a shaky breath, her eyes locked on the doorway behind her. Because, she said, voice barely audible, he already arrived in Dayton 3 days ago. And then, a sharp knock pounded on the front door. The pounding on the door sent a shock through the entire house. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the autumn wind outside seemed to pause. Thomas felt a chill crawl up his spine, cold and unmistakably familiar, the kind that comes when the past stops knocking and starts demanding to be let in. Megan clutched the sofa cushion so tightly her knuckles turned white. No, she whispered, shaking her head. It can't be him. He wouldn't just show up. Not like this. But her voice lacked conviction. Fear had already taken root. Ethan stepped in front of Megan instinctively, protective even through his confusion and pain. His heartbeat hammered violently in his chest. He didn't know who he was protecting her from, or if he was strong enough to do it. But the instinct was automatic. Blood or not, she was his sister. Laura's face paled. He knew I was coming today, she whispered. I told him I couldn't keep carrying this alone. I didn't tell him the address, but he must have followed me. She swallowed hard. He's capable of that. Thomas felt anger flare in him. Not hot, but heavy and controlled, like a weight he was finally willing to lift. He's not coming near my children, he said quietly, but his voice carried an authority that surprised even him. The knocking came again, this time slower, heavier, a deliberate rhythm. Not frantic, not polite. Confident. Jenna moved closer to Ethan, gripping his arm. Should we call the police? She whispered. Her voice trembled, but she was the only one thinking tactically, already calculating options. If he's dangerous? No, Thomas said quickly. Not yet. We don't know what he wants. And if this turns into a bigger mess, if old rumors get stirred up again, it will destroy your mother's memory. His voice softened, pain flickering through it. I won't let that happen. If you've ever had to confront a ghost from your past, someone you hoped you'd never see again, tell me truly, did fear or courage speak for you in that moment? Megan wiped her eyes, but more tears formed instantly. Dad, we're not ready for this. We're not ready for any of this. I don't even know who I am right now. Thomas stepped toward her, legs unsteady but determined. For the first time in hours, maybe years, he reached for her hand. You're my daughter, he said firmly. You always have been. You always will be. His voice cracked. No test, no letter, no man at the door can change that. Megan's breath hitched as his hand closed around hers. Something inside her, something small but vital, softened. A spark of the love she thought had faded flickered back to life. For the first time she saw her father not as a distant, aging man who made frustrating decisions, but as someone who had carried impossible weight, so she didn't have to. She squeezed his hand. Dad! The knocking stopped. Silence returned, but this silence felt different, charged, expectant, alive. Ethan moved toward the front window, careful not to be seen. He pulled the curtain back a sliver. His breath caught in his throat. There's someone out there, he whispered. Tall, broad shoulders, just standing still, not moving. Jenna shivered. Is he looking at the house? No, Ethan said slowly. He's looking down, like he's thinking. Laura stepped behind Ethan and peeked out. Her hand flew to her mouth. That's him, she whispered. That's Robert. Thomas felt years collapse onto him at once. The mistakes, the silence, the guilt, the buried history, all pressing down. But something else rose inside him too. Something surprising. Resolve. I'll talk to him, he said. Absolutely not, Megan burst out. Ethan turned sharply. Dad, no, you're not opening that door. Thomas exhaled slowly. If he's here for the wrong reasons, I need to know. If he's here for the right ones, then you deserve to hear it from me, not from him. But before anyone could argue further, Laura spoke, her voice soft but steady. Let me try first. He listens to me more than he listens to anyone else. Thomas looked at her sharply. You don't need to be part of this anymore. Yes, she said gently. I do. I helped hide this. I helped reveal it. I can help steady the fallout. Ethan hesitated. What if he tries to force his way in? Jenna slipped her phone into her pocket. Ready. I'll be right behind the door. If anything goes wrong, we call 911. Megan looked from her father to Laura to the door and shook her head in disbelief. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is our life. Thomas stepped closer to her and cupped her cheek with a trembling hand. Families don't break because of truth, he whispered. They break because of silence. Today, we stop being silent. Megan closed her eyes, her tears finally falling freely. Something inside her, something hardened by years of frustration, cracked open. She nodded slowly. Laura placed her hand on the doorknob. Everyone held their breath. The world outside felt colder now, the air sharp with anticipation. Laura slowly opened the door, just a few inches, enough to see the man standing on the porch. Robert Quinn didn't look like the monster the town had painted him to be. He wasn't snarling or raging or wild-eyed. He looked older, weathered, like life had taken more from him than he'd ever been able to give. His eyes lifted. He met Laura's gaze. Then his gaze slid past her, into the house, landing on Thomas. For a long moment the world stood still as the two men locked eyes. Nearly 3 decades of silence pressed between them. Then Robert spoke, his voice low and rough from a lifetime of cigarettes and regret. Tom, he said, we need to talk. And before Thomas could respond, before Ethan or Megan could even inhale, a small figure stepped out from behind Robert Quinn, a teenage girl, 15, maybe 16, with Megan's eyes, and Ethan's smile, and in her hand, she held a folded envelope with Linda Harper's handwriting on it. For a full second, no one in the Harper house moved. The appearance of the teenage girl hit harder than any name, any rumor, any old secret dragged into daylight. She stood there on the porch beside Robert Quinn, clutching an envelope as if it were both a shield and a lifeline. Her brown hair fell loosely over her shoulders, but what struck everyone most, what froze Thomas, Megan, and Ethan in place, were her eyes. They were unmistakably familiar. Soft, expressive, deeply human eyes. Linda's eyes. Thomas felt the air leave his lungs. His knees weakened and he had to steady himself on the back of the nearby chair. Megan covered her mouth again, tears springing to her eyes. Not of fear now, but something stranger, sharper. Recognition maybe, or loss. Ethan could only stare, the weight of the moment anchoring him in place. The girl took a tentative step forward. Robert's hand hovered near her back, protective but not possessive. That detail mattered. She wasn't being pushed. She had chosen to be here. Her name is Hannah, Robert said quietly. Even his voice sounded different now. Not confrontational, not proud. Just tired. She's my daughter. Laura stiffened, but she didn't speak. Hannah swallowed hard and looked directly at Thomas. And I think she might have been your wife's friend, she said softly, holding the envelope closer to her chest. My mom found this letter last year. It was written by Linda. She told me to keep it safe, and to come here when I was old enough to understand. Megan's breath caught. Linda wrote to you? Hannah nodded. Yes. Ethan stepped closer, anger and confusion wrestling inside him. Why would our mother write to your mother? Why would she send anything? Robert clenched his jaw. Because Hannah's mother was Linda's nurse during the last few months. His voice dropped lower. She knew things you didn't. Thomas's heart clenched. Memories of the hospital visits resurfaced. The nights he sat beside Linda's bed, her hand weak in his. The way the nurses sometimes paused before leaving, as if wanting to say something but unsure how. Hannah held out the envelope slightly. This letter, it talks about all of you. It talks about secrets, and about why she couldn't take them with her. Megan felt her knees buckle, and she slid onto the arm of the sofa. Mom wrote letters to strangers instead of to us. The hurt in her voice cut through the room. Why would she tell Hannah's family things she didn't tell her own children? Thomas answered gently, because she was scared and hurting, and she didn't want you two to carry her pain. If you've ever discovered that someone you loved was protecting you in ways you never asked for, tell me honestly, would you feel gratitude or betrayal? Hannah looked down at the letter again. I didn't come to cause trouble, I promise. She glanced between Megan and Ethan, her voice trembling. I came because my mom died 2 months ago, and this letter was the last thing she put in my hands. She told me, when you're ready, go to the Harpers. They'll help you understand who you are. Silence fell like snowfall, gentle, cold, heavy. Ethan stepped closer, swallowing hard. Why would she think we could help you? Hannah hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Robert, then back to Ethan. Because she said I might be connected to you, to your family. That Linda wanted everything to be clear one day. Laura closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. Linda always tried to prepare others for the truth, even when she couldn't prepare her own family. Robert's expression hardened, not with anger, but with self-loathing. I wasn't a good man, he said, but Hannah is good, better than I deserve. When her mother died, she asked me to keep one promise, find out how she fits into all of this. He nodded toward the envelope. That letter is why we're here. Thomas's voice trembled. May I see it? Hannah looked at him, vulnerable and somehow trusting. She stepped forward and carefully placed the letter in his hands. Thomas stared at the envelope, at Linda's handwriting, the looping letters he had traced 1,000 times in old birthday cards, grocery lists, and love notes. His hands shook as he turned it over. Open it, Megan whispered. Her voice was hollow, fragile. Please. Thomas slowly tore the top and pulled out several folded pages. The ink was slightly faded, but Linda's script was clear, steady, written on a day when she still had hope. He began reading silently. His eyes moved steadily at first, then widened, then froze. His breathing halted. Dad? Ethan asked. What does it say? Thomas didn't answer. His hands started trembling so violently the pages rustled. Megan stood, panic rising. Dad, what is it? Thomas's face drained of color. Tears filled his eyes. Not slow, gentle ones, but fast, desperate ones that betrayed a truth too painful to hold. Ethan stepped forward to take the pages, but Thomas stumbled backward as if protecting them. No, he whispered. You're not ready. Ready for what? Megan cried, her voice cracking. Thomas looked up, grief spilling over his expression like a broken dam. His lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Hannah watched him, her own eyes filling with fear. Mr. Harper, what did she say about me? Thomas finally forced out a sound, barely a word, more like a gasp. Linda, he whispered, choking on the name. She said she did a test. Ethan paled. Megan grabbed the back of a chair. Thomas's tears fell freely now. She found out who the father was. Silence swallowed the room whole. Robert stiffened like someone preparing for a blow. Megan's voice cracked into a whisper. Who? Thomas lowered the letter. His lips trembled. It wasn't Robert, he whispered. Ethan inhaled sharply. Then who? Thomas looked at both his children, really looked at them, and his next words shattered the last pieces of the world they believed they knew. One of you is not Linda's child at all. For several seconds no one in the room could even blink. Thomas's words hung in the air like a crack of thunder that refused to fade. Megan felt the floor tilt beneath her. Ethan felt his chest tighten, as if someone had reached inside and squeezed his heart. Even Robert, who had braced himself for many outcomes, staggered under the weight of a truth he never imagined. Hannah stepped back, startled. "Not Linda's child?" she whispered. "But how is that possible?" Thomas clutched the letter, knuckles white. His breath trembled as he forced himself to continue. Linda wrote that during all the confusion, the guilt, the fear, she agreed to a test. He swallowed hard. A maternity test. Megan felt her entire world narrow to a single point. "You're saying Mom wasn't my mother?" Her voice cracked painfully on the word mother. Thomas's lips trembled. "Not one of you. Not biologically." The room began to sway. Ethan grabbed the edge of the table, dizzy. "That doesn't make sense," he whispered. "She carried us. She raised us. She—" He stopped. A horrifying possibility dawned. Were we adopted? Thomas shook his head violently. No legal adoption, nothing like that. Megan's breathing turned sharp and shallow. "Then what? Dad, what are you saying?" Thomas pressed the letter to his chest as if it could keep him upright. "There was a mix-up," he said, "at the hospital, when you were born." His voice broke. "Linda never told me until she got sick. She said she couldn't carry the guilt anymore." Ethan blinked rapidly. "A mix-up? Like they switched the babies?" Thomas nodded weakly. "She said one of you wasn't ours, and our biological child was sent home with another family." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Even the junk removal workers exchanged horrified glances. Hannah's eyes widened as she looked between Ethan and Megan. "So, one of you doesn't share blood with either parent?" Megan felt something sharp and unbearable claw at her chest. An entire lifetime, birthdays, lullabies, family dinners, her mother's voice, her father's hands tying her shoes, all seemed to blur, threatened by a single monstrous question. "Which one?" she demanded, her voice shaking violently. "Who is it?" Thomas lowered his head. Linda didn't want to know. She refused the final result. Ethan felt the ground slipping. "So you don't know?" Thomas closed his eyes. "No. If you've ever questioned where you came from, even for a moment, you know how identity can crumble in your hands like dry earth. Tell me, would you want the truth, even if it shattered the life you knew?" Megan paced, hands in her hair, sobbing softly. Ethan felt tears burning his own eyes. He wasn't sure if they were for his sister, himself, or the mother who kept this silence until she died. Robert finally spoke, voice low. "If this is true, if one of the children was switched at birth, then someone else out there has been living a life that wasn't meant for them." Laura nodded slowly. "And someone else raised a child that wasn't theirs." Jenna frowned, stepping forward. "But why did Linda write to Hannah's mother about this? What does she have to do with a hospital switch?" Hannah looked down, then back up with a trembling breath. "My mom was a nurse at the hospital that year. She always said she saw something strange the night I was born. A rushed delivery, a mix-up with ID bands. A supervisor who told her to keep quiet." The room went dead silent again. Ethan stared at her. "Are you saying you could be?" Hannah shook her head quickly. "No, I'm too young. But my mom believed the hospital had other mistakes around that time." Her eyes softened. She believed Linda was trying to protect her kids, even when she didn't know the full truth. Megan wiped her tears and straightened suddenly, determination igniting behind the grief. "We have to find out. We have to do DNA tests. All of us. Now." Ethan nodded. "We can't live in this limbo anymore. If we have a sibling out there, or if one of us is—" His voice broke. "We need answers." Thomas clutched the letter. "There's more," he whispered. Everyone froze again. Thomas slowly unfolded the second page, his hands trembling so badly Ethan had to steady the bottom corner for him. Linda said, "She traced something, a paper trail, a name." Megan's eyes widened. "A name of who?" Thomas swallowed hard. "The woman who might have taken our biological child home." Ethan's heart stopped. "Who is she, Dad?" Thomas opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Hannah gasped and pointed to the driveway. "Someone's coming," she whispered. They all rushed to the window. A dark sedan pulled in slowly, deliberately. The engine shut off, and a woman stepped out, older, maybe in her late 50s. She held a folder in her hands. She walked toward the house with purpose. Laura's breath hitched. "I know her. She worked at the hospital. She was there the night of the births." Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. Linda wrote her name in the letter. The woman reached the porch. The doorbell rang, and Thomas, pale as a ghost, whispered the final confirmation. "That's her." The doorbell echoed through the house like a pulse. Slow, deliberate, unavoidable. No one moved at first. The woman on the porch stood perfectly still, her expression solemn, almost grieving. She wasn't a stranger to truth, but she carried it like a burden she had waited years to set down. Thomas's hand shook as he reached for the doorknob. Megan stepped forward quickly. "Dad, wait. We don't know what she's here to say. We're barely holding together as it is." Her voice trembled, but there was strength beneath it, something rebuilding inside her despite the chaos. Thomas gave a small nod. "I know." He looked at both his children with eyes full of pain and love. "But we can't run from this anymore. Not after everything you've just learned." Ethan swallowed hard. "We're not running. We just need to breathe. If you were facing a truth capable of rewriting your entire identity, would you open the door or walk away?" Thomas exhaled and finally opened it. The woman took a step inside, her eyes scanning each of their faces before settling on Thomas. "Mr. Harper," she said softly, "my name is Denise Carter. We spoke many years ago, briefly." Megan studied her carefully. "You worked at the hospital?" Denise nodded. "For 32 years. Labor and delivery. I was there the night both of your children were born." Ethan's heart dropped. "Both?" "Yes." She hesitated, then added, "And I carried a mistake with me for decades." Silence blanketed the room. Even Robert stepped back, giving space to something sacred and terrible. Hannah moved closer to the staircase, hugging herself as she watched, unsure whether she belonged in this moment or not. Denise opened the folder in her hands. Inside were old documents, yellowed, creased, bearing the hospital's outdated logo. She held them as though they were pieces of broken glass. "Linda contacted me before she passed," Denise said. "She wanted answers. She wanted closure. And I couldn't give it to her in time." Thomas's throat tightened. "She told me she spoke to someone. She didn't tell me who." "It was me," Denise whispered. "She was kind, gentle, too gentle to carry the truth I finally found." Her voice cracked. "I am so deeply sorry." Megan stepped closer, tears in her eyes. "Sorry for what? Please, please just say it." Denise's composure faltered. She wiped her eyes, then continued. "That night, 2 babies were brought into the nursery. 1 girl, 1 boy. Both born within minutes of each other. Their ID bands were logged correctly, but a staff emergency happened. A nurse slipped. Another panicked. 2 babies cried at once." Her voice trembled. "A small mistake changed 2 families forever." Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead. "You switched them." Denise nodded, crying now. "We discovered the error hours later, but by then, your mother had already bonded with the baby she believed was hers. And the other family—" She stopped. Megan's tears spilled freely. "They took our real sibling, and you took theirs," Denise whispered. "No one reported it. The supervisor insisted both families would be devastated, so it was buried." Thomas felt the room spin. He sat heavily in the nearest chair. "Dear God!" Denise reached into the folder and pulled out another document. Newer. 2 months before she passed, Linda reached out again. She demanded the truth. She insisted the hospital re-examine every detail. Megan's voice cracked. She knew she was dying. Denise nodded. She deserved to die with peace. So I searched, and I found something she never got to read. She unfolded a paper with trembling fingers. The hospital kept backup ID recordings. One set, almost impossible to find, was mislabeled but preserved. Ethan stepped closer, breath shallow. "And?" Denise looked at both of them, tears streaming. One of you was never supposed to leave with the Harpers. Megan shook her head violently. Just say who? Denise hesitated, her voice breaking. I can't. Not with certainty. The records match one child by birth time, but the ink is degraded. The names are smudged. The printers were flawed in that year. It's enough to know a switch occurred, but not enough to identify which baby went where. Megan's sob burst out. So, we still don't know? Denise wiped her face again. No, not without DNA testing. That's why I'm here, to finally give you the chance at truth Linda wanted. So she handed Thomas a sealed kit. These were prepared for you. Ethan took one, hands trembling. So we can finally know? Denise nodded. Yes, and I will help track down the other family once we have results. Silence wrapped around them, this time not crushing, but holding them gently, like a pause before something sacred, something healing. Megan walked to Thomas, tears rolling down her cheeks. Dad, she whispered, no matter what these tests say, you're my father. He pulled her into his arms, sobbing quietly into her hair. And you're my daughter, always. Ethan joined them, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. And I'm your son, no matter what. It was the first time in years they had held each other like this, a family, shaken but still standing, cracked but not broken. But behind them, a quiet gasp broke the stillness. Everyone turned. It was Hannah. She was staring at the photos on the mantel, the ones of Megan and Ethan as infants. Her face had gone pale. Slowly, she stepped toward the frames. I've seen this, she whispered. I've seen this picture before. Ethan frowned. Where? Hannah pointed to the baby photo of Megan, wrapped in a pink blanket, wearing a tiny knitted hat with a lopsided pom-pom. My mom, Hannah said, voice trembling. She had the same picture in her drawer. Everyone froze. Denise's eyes widened in horror. Oh, God! Thomas stood abruptly. What are you saying, Hannah? Hannah met Megan's eyes and said the words that sent a shockwave through the room. My mom always wondered why she had a photo of a baby she didn't give birth to. The room spun. Megan grabbed the wall. Ethan felt his knees weaken, and Hannah finished, barely above a whisper, I think my mom was the other mother. For a long moment everyone simply stood there, suspended between the life they had known and the one quietly rewriting itself in front of them. Hannah's revelation settled over the room like a blanket woven from shock, grief, and a strange, flickering hope. The air was still, reverent, as if the house itself understood that something sacred had just been spoken. Megan wiped her cheeks, trying to steady her breathing. She looked at Hannah, not as a stranger, not as an intruder, but as someone who might be carrying a piece of her own story. You think your mother was the one who took our sibling home? She asked softly. Hannah nodded, clutching her own elbows for support. She never told me directly, but she always said she believed something was wrong at the hospital, and she kept that picture, your picture, for years. She said it was a reminder of something she never understood. A tremor moved through Thomas. He stepped closer to Hannah, his voice gentle, almost fatherly. Your mother was a good woman. Linda trusted her. That means something. And if she kept that photo, she must have been trying to piece together the truth, too. Hannah's lips quivered. I think she wanted to tell me before she died, but she ran out of time. Ethan exhaled shakily, but for the first time since the truth began unraveling, compassion overtook fear. We can find the answers she didn't get to. He looked at Megan, then their father. We can do it together. Megan nodded slowly. She stepped toward Hannah, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. If there's even a chance we're connected, she said, then you're not alone. Not in this. Not ever. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't shy away. Denise Carter, still holding the folder, looked as if 1,000 pounds had been lifted from her. I've lived with this burden for 30 years, she whispered. Today, I finally feel like I've done something right. Thomas touched her arm kindly. You can't change the past, but you came here today. You gave us the chance to heal, Linda would have thanked you for that. Denise nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Robert Quinn shifted, uncomfortable with the tenderness unfolding around him. Yet something in his expression softened as he watched Hannah being embraced by people who only hours ago were strangers. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't a good man," he said quietly. "I made mistakes that hurt a lot of people. But Hannah, she's the best thing I ever did. If she finds family here, any kind of family, I won't stand in the way." Thomas stepped toward him, extending a hand, a gesture filled not with blame, but with humanity. "We all have regrets, but we all get chances too. Maybe today is one for both of us." Robert stared at the hand, surprised, then took it in a firm, grateful shake. The DNA kits lay on the coffee table, small but powerful symbols of the next chapter. Megan looked at them, inhaled deeply, and said, "Whatever the results say, we're family, not because of blood, because of love, and because of everything we survived together today." Ethan nodded. "We'll take the tests. We'll find the truth. And after that, we'll find the other family too. No matter what it takes." Hannah looked at them all, her voice soft, but certain. "If my mom really was the other mother, then she loved you, even from a distance. I think she wanted us to find each other." Thomas smiled through tears. "Then we'll honor that." The rest of the afternoon unfolded gently. No shouting, no accusations, just quiet conversations, shared tears, and tentative smiles. The junk removal workers slipped out unnoticed, leaving the family to their healing. Laura stayed to comfort Thomas, her presence a reminder that forgiveness can come from unexpected places. As the sun dipped low in the sky, warm golden light filled the living room. It cast a soft glow over the scattered boxes, the old photos, the wooden chest still open in the corner, all the relics of a life nearly thrown away, but now finally understood. Thomas gathered his children and Hannah close, embracing them with an arms-wide sincerity that had been silent for too long. "Your mother's greatest fear," he whispered, "was that the truth would tear us apart. But she never understood the strength of the family she built, even through mistakes, even through secrets." Even now, Megan rested her head against his shoulder. Ethan wrapped an arm around them both. Hannah stepped in shyly but confidently, and Robert watched quietly from the doorway, a faint but genuine smile touching the edges of his tired face. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. DNA results could confirm fears or rewrite their connections completely. But for the first time all day, the uncertainty didn't feel like a threat, just a path forward. A chance for healing, a chance for truth. As evening settled over the Harper home, Thomas looked at the people gathered around him, the children he raised, the girl who might become part of them, the man who came seeking answers, the woman who helped carry burdens that weren't hers. A strange, unexpected peace warmed his chest. "Family," he said softly, "isn't about how we begin. It's about who we choose to hold on to." And on that quiet, golden evening in Dayton, Ohio, they chose, each in their own trembling, courageous way, to hold on to one another.